We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. William Casey. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. William Casey.
Hello, hello, hello. Oh, that should be good now. Sorry, I wasn't looking at my levels there. Let's start over then. So yeah, we've got the William Casey quote, and we'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything that the American people believe is false or untrue. And I mean, this is a super creepy thing for the director of the CIA to say. And I don't think anybody really understood what he was talking about when he said it. But it is undoubtedly a springboard for tonight's podcast, which is the thought war. Because we are in a war of thought right now. Okay? There's just no other way to put it. We are in a war of thought right now. And, you know, as you reflect on this and you start to think about it, a lot of weird thoughts come to you. Now, one of the thoughts that comes to me is one about, like, the integrity of the being. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, when you're living in what we in the West consider to be an outright dictatorship, like North Korea, like Cuba under Castro, like some people say Russia is under Putin, but I'm not quite sure I believe that one. We know that they're under a dictatorship because of the harsh strictures put upon them. And all of the control in those societies is done quite overtly. Meaning you're basically told you can't say this, and if you do, here are the consequences. And, you know, in certain circumstances, dissidents will step out and they'll be severely punished. I mean, it happens in all of these dictatorial countries. It happened in Iraq. They had Abu Ghraib was originally Saddam Hussein's prison to torture people, and then the U.S. went in and used it. Imagine the ghosts in that place. But we have, in many ways, an even more odious system of control in the West. And because it's not overt, nobody calls us on it. Okay? But you could make the case that countries as iron-handed as China under the present Beijing rule and Xi Jinping, North Korea under Kim Jong-un, Iraq under Saddam Hussein, that in many ways those countries were more free than we are in the West now. And one of the reasons they're more free is the basic internal sovereignty of the person is not interfered with. It's not molested. The basic thinking processes of the person. What makes our particular form of dictatorship so odious is that it happens at the level of consciousness, and it happens with a lot of mind control techniques that are very surreptitious. You know, let's coin a phrase. It's kind of like roofie governance. You get roofied, okay? And you know what roofies are, right? It's the date rape drug, and you don't remember anything, and you just kind of wake up the next day and there's no sense or memory of what happened. And it's referred to as the date rape drug. So this is what's going on in the West. And let's just take a look at a little bit of this and find our way into this topic, and I'll find my footing in this topic. Here's Ocasio Cortez, the young Democratic.
I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy, because that is a part of what happened here. And we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into.
Say something that's false. Well, how about, let's ask how a bartender who's been in federal politics, 4 years, is now worth $29-30 million US on a salary that is maybe $140,000 a year, and you have to maintain 2 residences. You have to maintain a residence in Washington and a residence in the jurisdiction that you represent, and in her case, it's part of New York City. So there's a question, how do you have $29 million to your name? Why is politics so corrupt? And why has public service become one of the most lucrative businesses in the world? There's a starting point, you see? Okay, but that's just the very beginning of what we're going to discuss today. Now we're going to get into a much longer one, and we're going to talk, we're going to spend some time here. It's going to be painful, and I do apologize in advance. We're going to spend some time with Rachel Maddow and Hillary Clinton.
Joining us now is Secretary Clinton, former Democratic presidential nominee, Secretary of State, U.S. Senator, First Lady. Her new book is called Something Lost, Something Gained, Reflections on Life, Love, and Liberty. It comes out tomorrow. I got halfway through my preview copy of the book and immediately ordered it for my mom and dad. Secretary Clinton, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's a real pleasure.
Rachel, it is always good.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be doing this throughout the video. I'm going to be stopping. Can you imagine a human being who takes inspiration from Hillary Clinton? I mean, how decrepit would you have to be inspired by this person? How blind would you have to be not to be able to see what that person is? There is no doubt in my mind that the darkest rumors circulating about that woman right there, Hillary Rodham Clinton, are the tip of the iceberg of how vile she is as a human being, if you could even still call her a human being. I don't think we have a measurement. I mean, she looks like us, right? 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, a mouth, 2 ears. She seems to have a head. It seems to be sitting on top of shoulders, extended by what looks like a neck. She has 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 hands, 2 feet. I mean, she looks like us. But with God as my witness, that is not a human being. I don't know what it is, but that is not a human being. I'll try not to interrupt too much.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
I am struck by the fact that as his campaign careens into very, very offensive territory, the association with Holocaust deniers and the outrage.
So Rachel Maddow just suggested that Trump and his campaign are associating with Holocaust deniers. I don't know who they're referring to there. I don't think there could be a stronger Israeli candidate on the ticket. If Trump was not running as the Republican nominee for president, I don't think they could find anyone more pro-Israel than him. The man has actually said out loud that there should be a death penalty for anti-Semitism, which, by the way, is one of the articles of Noahide law, which is this thing I keep referring to that everybody thinks is a fantasy. You may think, okay, it's a fantasy, And yet 3 billion people belong to religions that state this has to happen. That the Messiah comes, the temple gets built, this catalyzes the return of Christ for the Christians and the return of the Mahdi for the Muslims. 3 billion people believe this, and nobody can see this coming. It's like a freight train, okay? And Trump is going to facilitate it. But I'm just going to pick this apart. I stopped there to just point out to you that Rachel Maddow said that Trump's campaign is associating with anti-Semites. Basically, that Trump himself is an anti-Semite and a Holocaust denier. Okay? I mean, and the thrust of this interview is about propaganda and what's going to be done to propagandists if the Democrats get in. Okay, let's get back into it.
Is at Arlington National Cemetery, of all places, the insults to recipients of the Medal of Honor, the recent incredibly racist and dangerous lies about specific groups of immigrants, Haitians in this case, and Venezuelans in the case of Colorado. I am struck by the fact that as much as we thought we might have been inoculated against sort of out.
So Rachel Maddow is telling the American public in the presence of Hillary Clinton that there's no problem with Venezuelan immigrants. There's nothing going on in Chicago. There's nothing going on in Colorado. There's no problem with the Haitian immigrants. There's nothing going on in Springfield, Illinois, despite the fact that you can find dozens of first-person testimonies on social media. Okay? And first-person testimony is the basis of journalism. You hear it once. If it's outlandish, your editor will say, I need this corroborated. You get 2 people going on the record. It's news. Okay? That's the way journalism works. It's that simple. Rachel Maddow is now telling us that this is all a lie. Nor is she addressing the incredible numbers of immigrants coming across the border. No, nor is she addressing the flip-flop in Kamala Harris's campaign. I mean, even podcasting is getting so absurd now that I have to explain this to people, okay? But I have to, because this is the job and there's so much at stake now, it's unbelievable, and it has to be done. But, just listen very carefully. And I'm going to stop at some key points because I have some other material to go through tonight, and I'm going to explain to you what's really going on here. So let's get back to it.
Rage tactics like that, where everything else gets thrown by the wayside and everybody starts responding to his outrage du jour. It's a way of sort of yanking everybody's chain. I sort of feel like we haven't learned, and he's still being taught, especially by the media, that the more offensive he is, the more he can dominate the media space entirely. And I feel like you've been a good diagnoser of that, not only from when you were up against him, but from when others have done so. Do you have an antidote for that, or a way that people can talk themselves out of taking that bait?
I think that's really a critical question, and I think there's a couple of things going on here. You mentioned the press, and sadly, the press is still not able to cover Trump the way that they should. They careen from one outrage to the next. What was outrageous 3 days ago is no longer on the front pages, even though it threatens the physical safety of so many people, particularly, as you point out, immigrants that he and...
Okay, now, listen to what she just said. Trump's statements are so incendiary, the immigrants are in danger. Okay? Despite the fact that they're a unified body of 20,000 in Springfield, Illinois, a unified body, according to J.J. Carroll, the former immigration boss, the border guard manager, 700,000 Venezuelans have been dropped into one section of Chicago. Their presence is so pronounced, and their behavior is so pronounced. Blacks, including gang members, are now saying we're being replaced, which, according to the Democrat administration, was a dog whistle for white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, and all of this other sort of nonsense, okay? But none of it adds up when you look at it under a microscope. So we're now supposed to be worried about the safety of 20,000 Haitian immigrants. By the way, That one point alone has never been disputed by the liberal media. Okay? Why 20,000 in a town of 56,000 people? Okay? When they get to another 8,000, they're 50% of the population of the town. Why would you change the demographic of a certain location in the United States to that degree? To the point where the people who live there don't feel comfortable anymore. And everything they're saying about no dogs or cats going missing, it's all been proven false. You can see recordings of the city council meetings in Springfield, Illinois, months before this broke, like from 2-3 months ago, and people are going in and they're talking about this to the mayor and to the city councilors, okay? They're talking about this. Anyways, let's get back to it.
Vance have decided to demonize. And I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is.
Because he isn't.
The late, great journalist Harry Evans, one time said that, journalists should, really try to achieve objectivity. And by that, he said, I mean, they should cover the object. Well, the object in this case is Donald Trump, his demagoguery, his...
Demagoguery. Demagoguery, okay? That's how Democrats say populism. Demagoguery.
Danger to our country and the world, and stick with it. They were merciless about what they saw as President Biden's, problems in the debate and calling for him to withdraw. I believe Donald Trump has disqualified himself over and over and over again to be a presidential candidate, let alone a president. The second thing, though, is that part of what Trump is counting on is for people to get desensitized. I mean, oh my gosh, did you hear what he said yesterday? Did you hear who he attacked? Did you hear the viciousness? And it just like with a shrug, okay, fine, we're moving on. Well, Americans need to understand that they have to take Trump both seriously and literally. He has said what he wants to do. He and his allies with Project 2025, his desire to be a dictator, at least on day one.
Now, if you haven't taken a look at Project 2025, you should, and I will this week do a podcast about that, okay? I will go through the entire document and highlight what it is. But it's basically a death blow to radical liberalism. It's definitely going to cut back on the availability of abortion, which, by the way, I think is a good idea, okay? Now, you may say, well, Bruce, it's not your body. It's not your right to choose. Well, I've always found that strange, and I think that every man who's ever gone through family court also finds it strange, okay? If we're going to allow first trimester abortions, should there not be a law that states that the father should be notified as soon as possible, and if he defaults on paternity, he can file a document at a courthouse or through a lawyer or a notary and saying, just so the mother knows, I am not interested in being a parent to any child of this temporary sexual union, which was not meant to produce a child. I don't have any interest in being a parent, nor will I be available financially to support this child if the woman decides to go on with the pregnancy. Now, I know when I say, I first started saying that out loud about 15 years ago. And people thought, oh my God, that's the most horrible thing I've ever heard anybody say, Bruce. Why would you say that? And I said, well, we live in a society that preaches equality. And because it's the woman's body that carries the child for 9 months, but she has the choice to be a mother or not be a mother, independent of the pregnancy. The father does not. If there was a process in place by which the father could file in the first 3 months, or ideally in the first 6 weeks, and say, look, I have no interest in paternal responsibilities. I have no interest in being a father. And you could lawfully and legally terminate any recourse the woman has to come after you for child support. And then the woman still has time. Well, if I have this child, I'm going to be a single mother with no financial resources. What should I do? Okay? And again, I'm not trying to strike controversy with this, but if you're going to talk equality, is that not equality? That both people have to want to be parents? That if you drag a father into the process, that with a woman he never married and never intended to procreate with, that you will irrevocably change his life for a quarter century because child support goes through university and all kinds of things now? Irrevocably change his perspective. Okay? So if it's the woman's body and it's her right to carry the baby, I respect that. But why is there no reciprocal right for fathers to deny paternal responsibility in the first trimester? Think about it.
All of that is in the public record. And I believe that more Americans have to be, willing to endure what frankly is discomforting and to some extent kind of painful, to take him at his word and to be outraged by what he represents. And then finally, the hopeful side of this is that I do think more and more Americans are, rejecting the kind of chaos that he represents. We can't go back. That's what.
He doesn't represent chaos. He represents nationalism. He's the antidote to bank-led, dictator-led, socialist-led globalism. Why can't you understand this, you fucking reptile?
The Harris campaign says all the time, we're not going back. We're not going back to, what he failed to do to protect American lives during COVID. We're not going back to the,
Failed to protect American lives during COVID. What is she talking about? Is this a reference to him recommending hydrochloroquine and ivermectin, which have now been proven to be useful? Okay? I don't know what this woman is talking. She doesn't know what she's talking about. This is what's so amazing about the time we're in. How does she get away with it? She gets away with it because Rachel Maddow is sitting there and letting her get away with it. Because there's no challenging of what she's saying.
Romance with dictators that puts, innocent lives at risk and America's security in danger. We can't go.
America's security in danger. This from the woman behind the force that keeps sending money to Israel and sending money to Zelensky. Okay? And we know Zelensky has residences all over the world now. He's a billionaire, by the way. It's a great life, this political life, AOC went from being a barely able to make her rent bartender in New York to being worth $29 million in what, 4-6 years? In federal politics? That's a pretty good racket, but nowhere near Zelensky, who's a billionaire in a very small and impoverished country. But according to this reptile, the problem is Donald Trump.
Go back and give this very dangerous man another chance to do harm to our country and the world.
Speaking of dictators, the Justice Department and the State Department have taken a number of actions in the past several weeks, striking actions to both call out and indict and take action against the Kremlin for their attempts at interfering in yet another presidential election cycle on Trump's behalf. The State Department has put out a $10 million reward for information leading to for information about people who are about entities that are trying to illegally interfere in our election. We've seen these dramatic indictments from the Justice Department, including for paying millions of dollars, the Kremlin paying millions of dollars to pro-Trump influencers. We've seen the Justice Department seize web domains where the Kremlin had set up news sites, what looked like news sites, looked like versions of American news sites, but were secretly operated by the Russian intelligence services or by the Russian government. You feel like the U.S. government is sort of starting to figure out how to do this and taking this seriously enough, or do you still think there's a far distance to go?
I think there's a far distance to go. I applaud the actions taken
by
the Justice Department and the State Department. I think that they're very important. But truly, we are just at the beginning of uncovering everything that Russia, but not just Russia, other countries have done and are doing to influence our election. If you focus on Russia, and I commend you, Rachel, for your new movie.
Okay, I got to stop for a sec. I get so worked up, right? I'm not sure if I have an active or a reactive personality. It depends with, I guess with what I'm engaging. I mean, I can hardly even believe what I'm hearing. And, that people can still buy this. Russian influence in our election. Okay? Hands down, the biggest foreign influence in American politics is Israel. Tiny little country of 8 or 9 million, 6 or 7 million Jews, and the rest are Arab Israelis. Okay? So we send them billions of dollars in aid, and they use it to buy our Congress. Okay? Your Congress. I'm not American. But, it's absolutely amazing to me that they would have the temerity to even say this out loud. Okay, and if I'm just going to say this, if Putin is doing anything at this point, he's trying to save American lives. Okay, he has no interest in attacking or bombing or destroying the United States in any way, shape, or form. It is complete and utter nonsense. Okay, complete and utter nonsense. And people who are peddling this should be imprisoned. Okay? I'm actually jumping ahead because I'm going to steal her thunder. Wait for it.
Because we are only at the beginning of understanding the whole iceberg here. What the Russians started doing in 2015 and 2016, what they continued doing, they've gotten more sophisticated. They aren't even pretending anymore. Their international news operation, Russia Today, RT, is an arm of the Russian government, an arm of its intelligence operation. It's basically an extension of their spying efforts. They are using Americans, both those who are witting and willing and those who are unwitting and are just so surprised. They're getting $400,000 a week or $100,000 a podcast to parrot Kremlin propaganda. And we know from what even Republicans have said, the chairs of the Intelligence Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee and other Republicans who are currently in office have said that Republicans go to the floor of the Congress and they parrot Russian talking points. So I think it's important to indict the Russians, just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that...
There it is. Civil or criminal prosecution for disinformation. So we're seeing this in Australia. We're seeing it in the United Kingdom. You saw what's going on in the United Kingdom, okay? You know how one-sided everything's become over there. So now you can't even speak out against it. This is the key point, and really I could have trimmed it down to this 30 seconds, and the clip would have been fine for my podcast today, but I just wanted to berate them while they're talking. So let's just finish it. There's just a minute left.
Would be a better deterrence because the Russians are unlikely, except in a very few cases, to ever stand trial in the United States. They're not going to be going to a country where they can be extradited or even returning to the United States unless they are very foolish. So I think we need to uncover all of the connections and make it very clear that you could vote however you want. But we are not going to let adversaries, whether it is Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else, basically try to influence Americans as to how we should vote in picking our leaders.
Okay. Very, very, very powerful but completely false position put forth by Hillary Clinton. Now, remember always my context and the context on the Talamanca Review. I'm not what I would call a super Trump booster. When pressed on why I support him in this particular election, I generally say something like, he's the leper with the most fingers. There is no ideal candidate. Okay? Trump is loaded with flaws. And if there were any integrity at all in American politics, he wouldn't be up there. But he is an indication of how corrupt the process is. Okay? He is a litmus test. He is a mutated frog living in a toxic pond. Okay? And what makes him unique is he made his name and he made his reputation outside of politics. And he went to Washington, which has become a town of career politicians. Politics has evolved in such a way in the United States now that when you get in, it's almost like a lifetime position now. AOC will probably never be voted out of her district. You know, Dianne Feinstein's been in politics for I don't know how long. Nancy Pelosi. You just can't get rid of these people. Okay? And maybe that's the real discussion that we should be having is term limits. Okay? That would certainly cut down on the money peddling like AIPAC and stuff like that, because every time they buy a politician, if that politician only serves 4 or 8 years, they have to buy again. And sooner or later, they're not going to be able to afford that. But that has got to be the elephant in the room in terms of any claim of foreign interference on an American election. It's the Israeli interference, okay? And there's a lot of reasons people don't talk about it because with the proliferation of Protestantism, okay? Now, I'm going to sound like a 15th century Catholic here, and I don't want to start a Northern Ireland feud on the Talamanca Review, but Protestantism is very much a Jewish-controlled arm of the Christian world, okay? Because the Vatican knew who they were, okay? And again, when I say these things, don't immediately assume I'm a big fan of the other party, because I love chopping down Hillary Clinton because she's the most wretched witch to be in front of a camera in 50 years. Nobody's worse. Everything you've heard about her is true. The Huma Abedin video on the Anthony Weiner laptop, no doubt in my mind it's true. Okay? What I learned writing The Light of Darkness, the research I did that never made it into the book, no doubt in my mind. Pizzagate, no doubt in my mind. It really goes on. Absolutely no doubt. The only thing that still puzzles me is why people still can't grapple with this. Maybe it's just the darkness of it. I don't know. I don't have a reason for why they can't grapple with the reality of these things. So when I say that Protestantism is largely a Jewish-controlled arm of the Christian world, it doesn't mean I want everybody to flock to the Vatican. They're corrupt in their own way, okay? And very, very similar to the rabbis now in the utility of magic and all kinds of, and working with entities and all kinds of extremely dark things, okay? So they're no better. But for the sake of a political and an economic and a social history perspective, you have to understand that Judeo-Christianity is largely an Anglo-American invention. So the first Christian Zionists appeared in Britain, where the largest Jewish diaspora lived until the country got bombed, and then a lot of them, you know, after World War II came over to the United States, and they made that their new base of operations. And to nobody's surprise, Christian Zionism took off in the United States. Now, how could there be anything that we would call Judeo-Christian values? I don't know. The two religions are completely antithetical. Ask any Orthodox Jew. Do you believe in Judeo-Christian values? They'll spit in your face, you know, just for saying the word Christian. You can see these videos all over YouTube now. Okay? So there are no Judeo-Christian values. And, you know, so Israel is hands down the largest influencer of American foreign policy and American elections, okay? And there's only 5 million Jews in the United States, and there's about 330 million people. So do the math. What's 5 into that? It's about, It's about 1.65% of the population, roughly. 1.7, 1.65, 1.6, somewhere. I'm not going to break out a calculator. But infinitesimally small group of people, but tremendous sway. The two wars that America is in now are Jewish wars, okay? Zelensky is a Jew. He's shutting down the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Now, I feel obliged to say this because I do have a listener who sends me stuff about Russia, and most of the Eastern Orthodox Church, the bishops were, if they called them bishops, I think they're called bishops, the bishops were replaced with Russian intelligence people. Okay, but this is a very common thing in many churches. Okay, it's absolutely common in the Vatican as well. Okay, you don't get to be a cardinal unless you're sufficiently compromised. Okay, you don't vote your conscience in the cardinal of colleges. Okay, forget what you've seen in the movies and all that bullshit. Okay, it's just complete nonsense. So you have all these retarded Protestants going around thinking that the Jews are their buddies, and as soon as the Jews are done with fortifying their position in Israel and pacifying the Middle East and spilling whatever amount of blood sates them, I guarantee you they will turn their attention to the United States and actively seek to destroy it. And elements of the Jewish world are actively seeking to destroy the United States right now. Okay? So tonight we're talking about the thought war, and we're talking about information. And, you know, the one thing I do agree with Rachel and Hillary on is you just don't know what's true anymore. There's so much media out there. Everything is so twisted upside down that you just don't know what's true anymore, which is why I played the William Casey quote. I think he made that quote in 1981, that it was their goal to get the American population to a state where the disinformation was so intense they couldn't tell who was telling the truth anymore. That's a very dangerous state of mind to be in, because there's no rallying point for people. You can't defend yourself. And remember, the better part of warfare is psychological. And this goes right back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War. The better part of warfare is psychological. It's not manning equipment. It's not being able to shoot a gun well. It's none of those things. 80-90% of warfare is psychological. You want to be attacking an enemy that doesn't know the attack is coming. So, again, this goes into my master thesis that I've been talking about since the inception of the Talamanca Review, that the real war here is on America and the Western worlds, our world, the white Western world, which was largely Christian. Whatever force it is in the world, and I don't pretend to know. You know my thesis. I think it's partly visible and partly invisible, with the invisible portion of it doing the bulk of the controlling, and the visible portion of it acting as agency for the invisible portion of it. Okay? But some decree has come down, and it has been decided that the West is not going to be able to live the way it lives anymore. Is that fair? I don't know. That's a whole other podcast. Okay? Have we overconsumed the resources in the world to maintain a standard of living that can't be distributed to 8 billion people? I'd say yeah. Yeah. So remember, as we go through these topics, okay, you got to be fair and you got to be just. You can't just say, that's my side, I'm with them, they're my blood, I'm with them. Always choose what's right over any other form of loyalty. And you'll be pretty much okay in this world and the next. Okay? Always do what's right. Always choose what's right. All right, so let's get on to this now, because this is the main thing here.
So in 2013, it was legalized in the United States to propagandize its citizens. What? Like, that's some scary third world stuff going on. That's the kind of stuff that people use to topple governments, to take away freedoms.
Yes, you heard that right. Almost a decade ago, propaganda was legalized in the United States with the passage of the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which you've probably never heard of. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was buried in the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act for a good reason, because it repealed the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, which authorized the State Department and the mainstream media to engage in propagandizing foreign countries, but it prohibited releasing that same propaganda in America for public consumption. This prohibition was lifted when the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was signed into law by Obama.
Very simply, Obama gave it a reboot in 2012. So, no matter how outrageous the propaganda may be, it's completely legal.
Propaganda, in other words, a false narrative, for whatever specific purpose, is now much, much easier to perpetrate on the people.
Due to the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which went into effect on July the 2nd of 2013, scripted and orchestrated propaganda can now be presented to the American public as factual news.
So again, this is just a furtherance of what William Casey told us in 1981. Now, if there's one thing you should be getting from the Talamanca Review, it's this. These people plan long term. And because we human beings don't think in such long terms, and we until very recently did not really have any sense of what was being done to us, it's just that it's become so ludicrous now and so in our faces that we don't have any choice but to notice it now. But you'll notice not everybody is. And if this becomes normalized, we're going to have a cutoff point where the people who have a cognitive disassociation with the propaganda, meaning that you were raised and born at a time where this wasn't done to you, and then it shifted, as it shifted in the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which the person said correctly was snuck into the National Defense Authorization Act, okay? Under Barack Hussein Obama in 2012, just at the end of his first term, 2008 to 2012. Okay, so it's now completely legal. There is absolutely no consequence for media outlets in propagandizing to the American people. Okay? Now, when you consider the ownership of media, you then have to consider a relationship with the intelligence world. Okay? Because at some point you have to, at least I want to believe, that this liberty given in the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act serves some intelligence purpose, okay? Because if this is just in the hands of private sector people now who are operating on behalf of entities other than the United States, then it's even worse, okay? So with all of this coming to light, I want you to circle back and think about what Hillary Clinton said. That people who put misinformation on social media platforms will be prosecuted civilly and possibly criminally. Well, how is she going to do that if it's not illegal to do it? Okay? Which means that they're going to pass a new law really defining what a social media platform is and separating it from the permissible vehicles of propaganda, which are licensed and registered by probably the Federal Communications Commission, is how I imagine that they would do it, okay? And the rest of us using what we could call the people's media, we're going to be left out in the cold, and we're going to be subject to all the laws that those people should be subject to. But they're still going to have to prove that it's propaganda, and that will not be an easy thing to do in a court of law, unless this is all leading someplace even darker than my mind has gone yet, which is the utility of terrorism law on American citizens. Now, if you look at the people still sitting in jail since January 6, 2020, you could make the case that they're sitting there under terrorism law, because there's no law in the American legal canon that would allow the government to hold them in jail that long without giving them bail hearings, without charging them, without trying them, and without finalizing the process. This is the very principle of English common law, which is called habeas corpus, which means bring forth the body, which means you have to get a bail hearing within 48 hours of being charged with something, and the state has to make and appeal to the bench and a judge as to why these people should be denied bail. None of that happened to the so-called insurrectionists from January 6th. And it gets even worse. We now know that Nancy Pelosi actually orchestrated the chaos. She had the power to bring in the National Guard. She decided not to do that. So she threw gasoline on these flames. Nancy Pelosi wanted this to happen for her own reasons. Okay? At every level, you're getting played. And at a certain point, this is not going to be funny anymore. Because this is all leading to your death. If you think this is leading anywhere but your death, then you just have not been listening on the Talamanca Review. Okay? Remember the Deagle.com numbers, the depopulation figures by 2025. 2/3 of the United States gone. 330 million people down to about 98 million people. How are they going to do that? That's a lot of deaths. Is it false? I don't know. I don't think so. Will they hit the 2025 target? I don't know. They would need to have a nuclear bomb hit, tactical nukes hit the United States. And that seems to me, when you look at the war strategy of the Pentagon under the Biden-Harris administration, that seems to be their goal, is to get America nuked. They seem to be provoking Putin to nuke the United States. That's the way I see it. I don't see it any other way. Every single decision they've made, when analyzed by competent retired military analysis, is saying the same thing I'm saying. Anybody I've talked to who has any understanding of military and warfare is telling me, there's no way the United States could win a war right now against the Russia and China. And yet we continue to provoke and provoke and provoke and provoke. I mean, for crying out loud, there was even, and you can't blame this all on Zelensky. You can definitely call him a conniving little weasel for lining his pockets, because he's definitely taking a lot of that aid money. I don't know about a lot of it. I mean, well over $100 or $200 billion has gone to Ukraine. Maybe he took 0.5% as his commission, which would be $1 billion. But he's even sought a peace settlement, and he was close and ready to sign. And then what happened? Boris Yeltsin flew over there and scuttled the deal. Boris Yeltsin flew over there and scuttled the deal. They've now lost an entire breeding generation in Ukraine. The Ukrainian people may be done as a people. Okay? There are no more men and women between 20 and 35 or 20 and 40 to procreate. The women have left or been conscripted if they stayed, and all the men have gone to the front lines and died. Meanwhile, Zelensky is buying penthouse apartments in the best cities in the world, beachfront property in some of the most expensive places in the world. I think he has something like a dozen residences now, and the cheapest one might be $9 or $10 million. And this, I mean, it's psychopathy. You would have to have no soul to behave that way. This is why I habitually characterize them as inhuman. Okay? I don't care what backstory you want to do it, and I think even thinking about the backstory too much is problematic. That might sound a tad contradictory from the guy who wrote The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, which is all about the backstory, or the suggestion that there is an agenda and a planet afoot here. Okay? Has nothing to do with religion. I'd say it's more closely related to extraterrestrials. That's my thing. A lot of people laugh at me for that, you know. But based on the research and the experiences I've had writing these books, that seems like the logical conclusion to me, that we are not alone here and that we are being influenced by non-human forces. Religious people immediately go to demons. I don't think it's demons. I think demons are not what we've been told they are. Okay? And that's it. How do you know? Well, they're fallen angels. How do you know? You look at all the people doing podcasts now on these kinds of nonsensical topics. The fallen angels this, the Nephilim that. It pretends to be intellectual research, but it's pivoting off of mythopoetic doctrine, which is what Scripture is. It's mythopoetic literature. That's what Scripture is. Okay? So how could you have a serious science and serious analysis about the reality of the Nephilim when it's all pivoting off what somebody said 3 or 4, 5, 6,000 years ago? How do we even know there was a fall in heaven and angels fell? How do we even know that? Why would you even begin with that as a starting point for any argument about anything? That's how retarded the West has become, and specifically the United States of America. It's almost intellectually beyond repair now. I don't know how you could repair this. It's so far gone now. Okay? Now, remember, this is coming from a guy who, number one, does believe there's an intelligent creator, is comfortable calling that intelligent creator God, believes a personal relationship is possible with that creator, and believes spiritual practice and a spiritual life are absolutely foundational to living a good and productive human life. But do it without the scripture. Do it without, because how do you know it's true? Anything I know is true, I know by my own experience. And that's a big thing to be able to say in the field of spirituality. I know we go beyond our bodies. How do I know? I've been out of my body. I know there's life all around us. How do I know? Well, go back and watch the podcasts. Listen to the Simple Ghost story from when I was 21 years old. I'm 58 now. I have a dozen more stories like that. So there's no doubt that we live in a reality where the dead are right beside us at another frequency. Okay? In my mind, in my experience, there's no doubt. Okay? The extraterrestrials, I've experienced it. I've seen the ships. I've told you the stories. Okay? So what we're all trying to do is to get to some kind of unified position to put up a defense against this vile evil that is coming in to steamroll all of us and to kill all of us. Because when the death comes, they're not going to care what your religious beliefs are. They're not going to care whether you're an atheist. They're not going to care whether you're white, black, Chinese. It doesn't matter. The media attack on whites and the constant propagation of the idea of white supremacy, which is completely nonsensical now. There is absolutely no white supremacy. Ask the Brits if they feel that they're the supreme race in Britain right now. Okay? There's no white supremacy. It's a complete myth that idiots like Rachel Maddow and Hillary Clinton keep repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. Okay? And they can do that without legal consequence because of the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, July 2nd, 2012. This is the Thought War. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review. Anybody wants to call in, I'll hang around for a few more minutes. You can give me your comments, whatever you want to do. Podcast is done, so I'm just going to tell you briefly about the joy of a sauna. So I am absolutely loving taking 1 or even 2 saunas a day now. I just absolutely love it. It's my favorite thing to do. Southern. Okay. Southern. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we're in a real pickle here. And like I said, I mean, any kind of civil defense is I'm going to deviate from the sauna for a moment, although I am going to go cut some wood and have another sauna tonight. It's only 11:10. I still got lots of time to take a sauna. And my wife is just in 7th heaven. The 4 grandchildren are here. 2 twins. I think they're 10. Brianne and Sienna. And then another daughter, Sophie. And then the youngest is a boy named Tiago. And these are my stepson's kids. And they don't always come up to the mountain because the mother is afraid of snakes and stuff. You got to understand, the way I live in Costa Rica, 99 out of 100 Costa Ricans, 999 out of 1,000 Costa Ricans would not live the way I live. And when hearing about the way I live, think, oh yeah, that's how my grandparents lived, right? And most Costa Ricans are city people now and town people, like small towns of like 50, 75,000 people, or the big city of San Jose, or San Isidro over on the Pacific side, which is the second biggest city. And that's how they live now. Like real, like farm living jungle people up in the mountains. I'm like a hillbilly even to the Costa Ricans. So my wife's just in seventh heaven. My pizza's a huge hit. I mean, I made 4 pizzas today. Everybody loves my pizza, right? Everybody just absolutely loves it. And so I got this sauna finished like last week, and my final touch was getting some 3 mil polypropylene tacked up to the walls so the steam doesn't escape when I drop water on the top of the scalding hot inverted propane tank with wood burning inside of it. And the steam just comes in. And I mean, I'm telling you, in 30 minutes, I can sweat like a half a liter of perspiration. And it just, you feel so clean. It's like 10 times better than a shower. Now, I say these things just to pad the podcast out a little bit in case somebody wants to call in, 864-810-1039, or somebody wants to call in on Skype, Seen That Tinker 1, and to let you know that even though I can do these podcasts, and even though I'm aware of what's going on in the world, I'm not for a moment going to let it upset me, okay? I'm going to tell you that they're trying to kill you. I'm going to get a little upset at Hillary Clinton and Rachel Maddow, and I'm going to go fire a sauna. And then I'm going to watch some Netflix, and then I'm going to do some Qigong, and then I'm going to go to bed at 2:30 or 3, and then I'm going to get up at 9 because I only need 6 hours sleep. That's my life. And this life is just still so beautiful. I mean, I think even because of all the chaos going, okay? It's just an incredible time to be alive. And just an incredible time to be alive. All right, so you cowards aren't going to call, so I'm going to have to end this broadcast, all right? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.